But I always say that we have to be grateful for the heat in the summer. And if you've been around a while, you know that in the summer that we do heat affirmations, being grateful for the heat. Because now as we speak, people in the Northeast and even far down where Christy is in Charlotte, they're digging out of snow and ice. And although it's a little chilly, we have this beautiful day. So for that, I'm grateful. Anybody love digging out of snow and ice? You do? Are you medicated for it? I remember when I lived in Nashville, it doesn't really get super cold, but I remember a couple of times I'd go out and there was literal ice on the windshield. Oh, there's nothing worse than that. And I was working at Unity of Nashville, and I had to be there super early because we had 2 services. There's nothing worse than being outside at 6:30 in the morning and the sun is barely up, and it's like 15 degrees and you're scraping ice off the windshield. Oh my goodness. Marion, you had something to say? You're from Minnesota. Yes? You still haven't thawed out from your time in Minnesota. So we bless you if you're watching from Minnesota today. I hope that one day you will be able to thaw yourself. But isn't it funny how we're all so unique? Because years ago, when I traveled, I used to go to Canada quite a bit, and I spent a lot of time in Winnipeg, Canada, which is the coldest place that I have ever been. Winnipeg's that city that's right in the middle of the country, that's right above like Minnesota, and super, super, super cold. And I used to go do retreats and conferences there and had a great relationship with the Center for Spiritual Living there. And I used to go like in July and June, and it was still chilly then. I'd have to bring like a light jacket. Excuse me. And I remember one of the times the board there at the church said, "We'd love for you to come for our winter retreat." And I was like, "Well, tell me a little bit more about that." And they said, "Well, it's normally in January or February." I was like, "No, no, no." I said, "I want the lowdown. What's the temperature?" And she said, "Well, it's not really that bad. It's usually just like 40 below. And it can get to 70 below with wind chill, but it's not really that bad. We learned how to deal with it." I was like, "I will never deal with that." Then she went on to tell me that if you don't wear a scarf outside and completely cover your face, that you have 10 seconds before your face freezes. Doesn't that sound like a wonderful way to live? And so my dear friend, Joy Ryan is her name. I remember telling her, if I came up here and it got that cold, I would paralyze first, freeze, and then my head would fall off. And to show how different we are, she said, "Well, I hate the heat. So if I came down to New Orleans, I would stand there, catch on fire, and my head would fall off." So to each his own, I guess. We're all very different. This is, if you're aware and you watch some of the Christian traditions, this is the time of Advent. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. And also I'm going to have a time where I want you guys to share some thoughts of Christmas and holidays. It's going to be kind of a different service today with some participation for anyone that would like to share. We still have the wireless mic to be ready in a moment, don't we? And not right now, but after a while we'll get it ready. Maybe you can get it ready, Stevie Weevy, just as a warning there. So do everyone know what Advent actually means? It comes from a Latin word. Let me make sure I get this right. Adventus, excuse me, which means arrival or coming, particularly the arrival of something or someone of great significance. So Advent season is the time preparing for the birth of Christ, preparing for that. And many traditions and other spiritual paths and religions make kind of a big deal about this and light candles. Some of you may actually do this at home with your own tradition and light different candles for every week of the Advent, because every week is a different topic that's talked about. So this is actually the second week of Advent. Last week was the first. It's usually the first week of December. So anybody know what the second week of Advent is about? Anybody? Hope. Hope. Which is, I believe, without hope, our complete vision of our life and ourself can actually perish, especially if we're going through a challenging time. If you don't have hope and know that things are going to get better, it can bring a very distressing situation to ourselves. One of the things I always say to myself, if I'm not feeling good, if things aren't going well, if I'm going through a rough time, or one of my friends is going through a rough time, that's what always consoles me, is I remember and help to remind others when they're going through this, that no matter what is happening in this world, it's always temporary. It's always temporary. That's the nature of our world. The world of duality is always changing, is always different. I mean, one day you can feel on top of the world, and the next day you can feel down in the dumps, and there might not be any reason for it. I remember a couple of days ago, last week, I woke up one day, and for no reason at all, I just felt exceptionally well. I just felt so good, and I just wanted to scream it out off my balcony. I feel really good today. So, I start thinking, now, what did I do last night? What did I eat? Like, what time did I go to bed? I was trying to duplicate that, and, I couldn't duplicate it, because I think that is the rhythm of life in this world. We're supposed to have times that seem low, and we're supposed to have times that seem high. That's just part of duality. And no matter what your spiritual path may be, no one has ever promised us, any spiritual master has ever promised us that life would always be perfect. And that was a mistake that I made when I first found what I now call New Thought, which is unity and other teachings, coming from the background that I did, more of a fundamentalist idea, is that, I get to create my world, and I get to change it, and I get to be whatever I want to be, regardless of what is happening. And that always helps me to have hope. It always helps me to, there's a cliche, and it's a cliche for a reason, because it's true. This too shall pass. We've all heard that before, right? And it's true, because no matter what is happening, it's going to pass. And as I said, that day, I felt just awesome for no reason. It was just part of the cycle of life. So as people were preparing for the Messiah, that's what the Advent season is about. As it said, it's the coming of something, the arrival of something, especially of something very significant. Now, I don't know if you read the little post this morning on Facebook, but I kind of said, we have a special guest arriving today. Guess who that might be? And that's you. We teach that although the birth of Jesus was beautiful and significant and was a life changer in the world of duality, the teachings that Jesus brought into the world, we forget that we are also the Christ child. We are that presence. Jesus was, a lot of times in unity, we call Jesus the way shower. He showed us the way. He showed us the ultimate potential of what we could do when we got in touch with our divinity within man. So Jesus represents for us the combination of divinity within flesh. And there's all kind of levels. There's like a spectrum all along there. And it's up to us to how much of that we want to infuse into our life. So we are what we seek. We really are. That's the main reason why many relationships don't work out, or they work out first in what we call the honeymoon phase. Everybody, call the honeymoon phase. And then you hear that phrase, oh, well, the honeymoon phase is over. Well, what happened? Why can't the honeymoon phase stay forever? And my philosophical, this is Dr. Jack, the doctor is in. Remember on Charlie Brown, 5 cents, the doctor is in? My personal feeling on that, and what I've learned, is that many times we're unwilling to see our own magnificence, and we're unwilling to see that we are this presence of God, just as important as any spiritual master that's ever been here. We are part of this beautiful tapestry that is called life. We forget that, and so we have places within us that need to be healed, and we have wounds within us, and like kind of holes in ourselves, you might say, from wounds that have happened. And until those wounds are healed, we're always seeking for ways to replace those parts of us. And I believe what being in love is when you meet someone and even unconsciously, you just feel really good, because in that moment you feel like you've met someone that completes you. something that irks me so bad. And if you say it, it's not really a judgment, but for me, it's a pet peeve. Let's put it that way. When someone says, oh, wow, well, you need to ask my better half about that. Oh, can't stand that. Got to ask my better half about that. And I'm like, well, you kind of look like a whole person to me. Is there something like missing? Like you missing something that's wandering around somewhere? And we forget that we actually are what we seek. We are the Christ child. We are what we seek. We are what we're looking for. And that's so simple. And yet we make it so complicated. Remember that old song, looking for love in all the wrong places? And it's true. And there's nothing wrong with going through these kind of things because that's how we grow. You know, relationships are our main source of spiritual growth if we allow them to be, because our partner or the people that are around begin to mirror us, and we're able to see within them parts of ourselves that we dislike and the parts that we like. So you know the most important reason about realizing that you are the Advent, this is the celebration of your arrival, something significant, you're it, you are what you seek. The most important reason for you to realize that is that it is quite impossible to begin to see the nature of God and divinity in others until you fully claim it as yourself. It is quite impossible to begin to see God in everything until you begin to clearly see it within yourself. Literally, everyone that you come across is a mirror reflecting things back to you. As an example, a really simple one, if you become very angry at someone about something, if you're willing to look at that, you're angry about something within yourself. Most of us, in times, especially if we're really upset about something, we just don't even want to go there. Like it's all their fault, blame them, I don't want anything to do about it. But anything that triggers our buttons, anything that triggers something within us comes from an inner wound, something there. Sometimes people have said to me like, oh, I can't stand being around him because he pushes my buttons. And I say, well, you're the one that installed them. You installed them. There wouldn't be any buttons to push there unless you had installed them. And we see that because in some situations that happen in life, the very same thing may happen, and one person in the room totally has no feelings about it, and another person could get very much upset over the same event. It's because we're all looking at things from a different perspective based on our inner feeling of who we are. This has been so helpful for me, and I've been practicing it more during the holiday season, during this Advent season. Love's arrival, the time that love has arrived, something significant is showing up. I practice it a lot as I walk through the French Quarter and I see people that are homeless. Because as I have grown within myself and more begin to clearly understand and see my own divinity and celebrate that and fully embrace it, it's kind of scary when someone says, you're holy. You know, we kind of cringe at that sometimes. You're holy. You are. You may have forgotten it for a moment, but you are. And the more that I've been to realize that I was created in the image and likeness of God. I am like God stuff. I'm able to then transfer it to others. And, you know, you can transfer it to anybody, but I love doing it when I'm walking through the French Quarter and I see someone who obviously is in need. If they're sleeping on the side of the street or they're obviously hungry. And many times I will give leftovers or take sandwiches or whatever. But more importantly than that, the biggest gift that we can give to someone that's in need is to look beyond their need and their physical experience and to see who they really are. That is actually a miracle. Do you see the difference? So this is the difference. If I pass someone laying there, obviously homeless, in a box, you know, a lot of them are in boxes. If I pass them and say, oh, poor thing, like, I need to be charitable, poor thing, and I go get $1 or I get $5 or I get a sandwich, that's one thing. And that's helpful. But what is miraculous and what really makes a huge difference in transformation is when I pass that same person and I look at them and I think to myself, You are a holy child of God. You have temporarily forgotten that, and you're having an experience that may not be so wonderful, but you are a holy child of God. So let me help you remember that. And still go get the sandwich. Still go get the dollar. But see how different those two experiences are? Seeing that presence within each other instead of seeing anyone as a victim. I love Course in Miracles tells us this. It says, first of all, anytime you encounter someone, it is a holy encounter. Nothing is by chance. Nothing. The person you're standing by in the bank, everybody in this room, in this moment, you are having a holy encounter. And Course in Miracles says when you get together, especially if two people get together and they begin to talk about their life, whoever is the most sane in that moment can be the most helpful. Whoever is the most sane in that moment. And what it means by that, because Course in Miracles says that we've gotten so far off base, we're like insane, because God created us a certain way, and we are determined to prove that we can upend how God created us. And we're all on the path of remembering that. And so it says we're literally like an insane person. That's how far off base we are. And so the person that's more in touch with their divinity, that is the most sane, can be the most helpful. Everyone's had this before. Have you ever been with someone and they're telling you something going on in their life? They're having a problem or they just got a diagnosis. Have you ever been talking to them and weren't really sure what to say? And then all of a sudden you just think of something beautiful and you say it, and it almost feels like it's not even coming from you. It just feels like it's coming from another source, and it just really brings a lot of comfort and peace into the situation. That comes from as we learn to listen to the Spirit within us. It will always tell us exactly what to do. And many times, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, most of the time, just your presence is enough. Just your presence is enough. Nothing ever needs to be said in some situations. We're so used to filling the gap with noise. We're so uncomfortable if there's just quietness. Because if I knew you guys wouldn't freak out and go running out, we'd have like a 25-minute meditation in here. In that stillness. But we learn to see others as the divine presence that they are. That is the most helpful thing that you can do. Then we listen to Spirit and see what's the appropriate action. But when we talk about miracles, miracles only happen within our mind. That's where the miracle happens, as our awareness changes and we begin to see the world through the eyes of love instead of through the eyes of fear. That's where the real miracles happen within our mind. So literally, if we begin to see people that seem to be have problems or seem to be less fortunate than us, when we begin to see them as holy, beautiful children of God, just having a temporary experience and try to act as a conduit to help them remember who they are, that is a miracle in itself. And a lot of times, nothing even really needs to be said. As a matter of fact, that's my new definition of prayer. Prayer. My definition of prayer has changed drastically from the time I was a small child and my parents were ministers in the Pentecostal church, and we would pray to God as hard as we could, hoping that if we was hurt and we had enough faith that whatever happened, it's what like Wayne Dyer used to say, that's like the Coke machine God. If you put in enough quarters in you get a soda out, And it's changed throughout the years. And then then it changed to just affirming things from my life. In Unity, we say the word affirmative prayer, which affirmative prayer is simply recognizing that God has already given us everything. There's nothing to pray for. We just have to affirm that what is already there is ours because we push it away. We push it away. And so now my definition of prayer is simply this. It's knowing the truth for someone when they're temporarily not able to do it themselves. Knowing the truth for someone when they're temporarily unable to know it for themselves. That is the biggest gift that you can give anyone. especially during this Advent season as we symbolically, think about, the birth. That's what I think about during the holiday season. I think of this is the birth, the rebirth of our awareness, our remembering who we are as the Christ child. Everyone in here is the Christ child. You're God made flesh. You're God made manifest. And so this season actually becomes a celebration of your arrival. And you're just as important no matter where you are in life or what is happening as the Adventist, the Latin word tells us, there's an arrival of something very significant, and that is you. So I was going to share, I like hearing about other people's stories and how different we all are. And I'm sure if you went around this room, everybody has had a different childhood and had a different upbringing. But most all of us have some beautiful memories, I would hope, of the holidays. And so I want to take a moment, if we could get, you got the wireless. So be thinking about this. I was going to, just take about 2 or 3 minutes to share. I think it'd be neat for us just to hear about, some holiday experiences. Mine was, I have so many, but my mom was obsessed over this candle, 3 wise men. It was like, I don't know what they were made of. It was some kind of clay, ceramic or something. The 3 wise men that was painted with like glaze and stuff, and the candles would come out of the top of their head, and they were stuck into styrofoam, and they had these really, like tacky, like plastic ivy sticking out. And she loved that thing, and it was absolutely hideous. And she had it literally for like 30 or 40 years, so the poor wise men were like all chipped up and were looking really ragged. But she would get that thing out every year and polish that thing up and rearrange. I remember the sound of the styrofoam when she was re-sticking the ivy, and they're like, as though rearranging the ivy was going to make it look a little bit better. She would spruce it up, as she would say. And while she was doing that, the tradition was my dad would climb on the roof, which was a very scary thing because my dad is one of these fathers that thought he knew how to do all these electronic things, but really didn't. So we really decorated our house, and we put lights all the way around the house, and then we'd actually have them on the roof. We had a slanted roof, so we'd put a bunch on the roof so you could see it from the road. And it never failed. My dad would head up there, and we would all just be terrified as he's heading up there with the lights and his hammer. And my mom would just be standing by the fuse box ready. Never failed. He would be hammering those places, the lights into place, and about halfway through, almost every time, you'd see a little explosion, a little bit of smoke. Mom would say, well, there it is, and she'd go flip the electrical box again, and we all got a big laugh about it. And it seems like a silly thing, but when I think about that, it just makes me smile and laugh, just how wonderful and beautiful my childhood was, and how much I loved Christmas. It was an amazing experience for me. And I have learned, it took me a while to realize that holidays for some people are not good. Sometimes holidays are very depressing and down for some people, depending on their situation. And so wherever you are in your life, hopefully you do have at least some good memories. So who wants to share just a few minutes about, do you have any great Christmas memories? Okay, David, right behind you, Weavy.
We have a lot of great Christmas memories. Probably the one that impacted me the most was sitting around my mom's piano, singing Christmas songs, drinking lots of eggnog. And my dad would always have like these gatherings at the house where people he'd worked with, and they'd always come over, and there'd be lots of people around.
Yeah, just a crowd of people having a good time. Yes.
And speaking about Merry Christmas to everyone first. Speaking about my dad, every morning, Santa Claus came, of course, but we would sit around in a circle and he'd read the birth of Jesus out the Bible, and that's what I remember most.
Oh, that's a nice memory. Yes. Who else? Sam over here. I knew she would have something because she's got snowman earbobs on, so Miss Christmas over here.
Okay, I spent a lot of my childhood here in the U.S., and as a custom, we put the Christmas tree up, and you had the presents and everything else like that. But when 1970, we moved to Europe, and there they didn't have the Christmas traditions they have here. They celebrate the Epiphany. So when Christmas came around, and we used to always have an artificial tree here, when we went there, we saw live Christmas trees, and I said, oh my God, we have to have a tree. And my grandmother, who had never even seen a Christmas tree, says, you cannot bring a tree in the house, that belongs outside. I said, we need a Christmas tree. We come from the U.S. We have trees here. And she goes, that tree's not coming in the house. And so we begged for like 2 weeks. We need our tree. She goes, okay, go get your tree. So we went out there and bought found the biggest tree. We chopped it down. We hauled it to the house. We put it up. And she goes, and how long is that supposed to stay there? I said, until the Epiphany. Well, it ended up staying until June. And so by the time we got there, the whole thing had died. And she goes, no more Christmas trees. I said, oh, that's what you think. And so every year, we didn't have ornaments to put on there because it wasn't a tradition there. So we had to kind of make our own little Christmas ornaments to hang on there. She ended up liking it, but every time she walked by the tree, she goes, yeah, right, a tree in the house, that's insane. Now they actually do Christmas trees there, so.
Oh, awesome. Yes. A couple more? Maybe a couple more? Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, they need to hear you who's watching us. So.
I'm Hindu, and so we really don't do Christmas, but after I came to this country, we do Santa because I have the kids. My little daughter is 6 years old. When she was 6, she's evil.
Wow.
So my older daughter is 9.5, was 9.5 at that time, and she sat and cut out a cardboard Christmas tree and said, "Dear Santa, we are Hindu. We do not celebrate Christmas, but I would appreciate if you could just sign that you visited us." and my younger daughter, 6-year-old, comes, "Oh, Tia, I don't even know why you go through this trouble. Don't you know all the gifts that we used to have it like a scavenger hunt in the backyard because I had a pine tree or whatever." So she said, "It's Mom. Mom is the one because I hear her running all over." It was such a disaster that morning. "Mom, is it you?" I said, no, it's Santa. It's Santa, you know. She was evil, broke every kind of, whatever spirit of, fun thing. Just,
Yes.
"Oh, this is not it. But anyway, that is one thing I remember. Sat all day making cardboard Christmas tree and everything. And well.
Awesome.
when
Well, I
the
hope she
season
got therapy. I hope she got therapy later in life. Yeah, kids are really different. Some are like that and some are not. So maybe one more? And if not. Did we hear a yes? Oh, Yvonne?
Yeah,
No?
I remember Christmas Eve more than Christmas Day, and I remember going to my aunt and uncle's next door and eating chicken gumbo and potato salad, and I had an Italian uncle who would make us Italian cookies, and then it was midnight mass and trying to stay awake. That was
Yes.
interesting.
How neat.
Okay, this is about Nicole. Santa Claus comes to everybody, right? Well, guess what? I have to pay Santa Claus.
Uh-oh, she's bribing Santa
I told her
Claus.
it's only for the poor kids. They get free gifts. We have to pay for Santa Claus.
Well, my mom, she grew up, she was 92 when she passed a couple years ago, so she grew up a long time ago, put it that way. But she said the tradition back then was, I guess she was a child in the 40s maybe? No, in the 30s. She said that, they wouldn't do Christmas until Christmas Eve. Any of you ever heard about this? It wasn't like this big, long thing. I think retail has turned it into this long season. And my mom used to talk about how they would get up on Christmas Eve all excited. That day, they would decorate. They would decorate the house. They didn't really have lights then, but they would have candles and beautiful things. And my grandpa would take them out into the woods, and they would cut a tree down and bring it in and sing carols and decorate and eat the dreaded fruitcake and, and have such a great time. And I just thought, wow, how beautiful would that be? And so she said her point was, she said it just made Christmas so much more special. Now we start seeing trees right after Halloween. So by the time it actually gets here, we're like, let's get that down. And one of our traditions here in New Orleans for everyone watching us, or at least I do this, is whenever you take the ornaments off your tree, you keep it up and decorate it for Mardi Gras. So during this special time, we're just so grateful for these ideas and these thoughts that help us to begin to realize that this Christ that we talk about is within us. It wasn't something that happened 2,000 years ago. It's happening right now, right here, within each and every one of us. There is this presence of life and love. And during this holiday season, may we remember and awaken. Begin to see ourselves as this beautiful child, created in the image and likeness of God. As we celebrate our arrival, remembering